Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers in Our Midst. My name is Sadie, and on behalf of the Port Moody Public Library, thank you so much for coming tonight. I would like to start by saying that the event tonight and all of the work that we do at the Port Moody Public Library is held on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation, which lies within the shared territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Musqueam, Kakite, Squamish, and Stolo nations. And I would like to personally thank the Coquitlam First Nation for continuing to live on and care for this land. I won't take up too much time, just a quick welcome, and then I'm going to pass it right over to Erik to introduce our authors tonight.
I think I might do the same. We do what we have to. So thank you again, everyone, for coming today. Oh, there's Gisela. We have a full house. Thank you to the library for continuing to host us. This being number 26 is my halfway point in the sense that I took over at number 13. So it's been really fun doing this. Sometimes we're the only audience is the readers, so I'm so happy to see more people here joining us today. Hopefully one day I'll pull your arm and you'll come up and read one day too. We have 8 readers today, and they're all here now, so I'm not going to talk long. So let me introduce our first guest. She insisted on going first, so her wish is about having lived overseas in Africa, Asia, and Australia for over 40 years. Mallee Stanley's writing has an international flavor. She has completed 5 historical fictions set in East Africa, Sri Lanka, India, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and Canada, with themes dealing with racism, injustice, and patriarchy. In my writing group, I can never correct her. She's one of my favorite writers, so I'm so happy to agree to read to us today. And she said she's going to read something different that doesn't deal with any of her usual themes. This is Mallee. Mallee Stanley.
I often visit Australia because I still have a daughter there. And while I'm there, I always explore, the neighborhood. While I was walking one time, I was waiting at the pedestrian crossing to cross a busy road when this man on the opposite side just sauntered across like he couldn't care. And all the traffic had to stop. And one of those cars was a police car. And police officer wound down the window and used the most foul language of this particular man. And I'm going to quote that language, but when I get to that part of the story, I'm going to just mouth it because there might be some young people walking past. Another time I was taking my daughter's dogs and we were at St Kilda Beach, and I saw a man bathing in the water there, just up to his knees. And police officers were near him as well. And that image is inspired this story. Before I begin it, I'm just going to explain what a Catherine wheel is, because I found my writing group didn't have a clue what it was. And when I said, oh, it's a cracker, I realized, oops, in Canada, that's something you eat. In Australia, that refers to fireworks. And so a Catherine wheel is something when you light it, it spins around and all these sparks fly out in a big circle. So with that image, I'm going to begin this story, A Dip in the Bay. Smoke from Victoria's eastern bushfires clung to Melbourne's air, and red grime from the New South Wales dust storm covered the footpaths after rain. I was wound up like a Catherine wheel, petrified by what would happen next. I swung open the door of the flat and stomped down the steps, leaving the door ajar. A soft lull of ripples against St Kilda Beach drew near once I stepped on the sand. The tide was high, and Port Phillip's Bay was like the smooth chocolate that coated a violet crumble bar. The sky was clear and the day mild. I fast-tracked straight to the water's edge when a woman rushed past and frowned at me. What was the matter with her? She pulled out a cell phone. Her lips trembled, but I eased into the water's glassy surface and waded up to my calves. Why wouldn't Mum speak to me this morning? What had I done this time? I swallowed the hurt and focused on how she once showed me how to fry eggs for breakfast. and taught me how to use an electric razor she'd bought me for my 18th birthday more than 10 years back. She even ignored Evie when my sister said it was time I moved out. So why wouldn't she even look at me this morning? What did I do wrong? The lighthouse stood on my left. Powder puff clouds drifted above. A dip in the bay was what I needed to clear my head after the madness of the week's weather, because my thoughts wobbled like Mum's wind chime. I was about to squat in the water when a sharp voice reached me. "Hey, you!" I cringed. They couldn't be calling me. I wasn't doing anything wrong. My neck muscles tensed when a voice hollered again. I glanced sideways. 2 cops stood on the beach. Another 2 were at the water's edge, one shaking his head with his mouth drawn in a straight line. What did they want? Frozen dead in my tracks, water lapped up around my mid-calves. One of the coppers motioned with his hand for me to step out of the water. I wasn't drunk, nor was I in deep enough to drown. I didn't budge until 2 of them took a couple of steps closer. Were they after me? "Hurry up," the tall one shouted. "Get back here." He sounded angry, so I inched towards them, then hesitated. Perhaps I resembled Jesus Christ walking on water with my long hair. The sea was mirror smooth, so the reflections made one of them look like he was walking on water. Was that how Jesus' method started? Maybe I was Jesus. "Come on, you, move it." I bit my trembling lip, thinking, should they talk to Jesus like that? I moved in their direction, but I was wary. If I had a bit of a swim to clear my jumbled brain, Mum would talk to me by the time I got back. She'd tell me what to wear, comb my hair, and remind me to shave. One officer took a few more steps into the sea. His shoes were submerged by the time he reached me. "Let's go." He didn't touch me, and I was grateful. I'd seen the way the cops belted up the abos a couple of times, so I shuffled out of the water without a fuss. I scratched my groin, still not sure what was the matter. No one else was on the beach, but the joggers who passed on the footpath 20 meters ahead swiveled their heads around in my direction. Halfway up the beach, 2 blue and white vans came in sight, and a woman screwed up her eyes at me from the other side of the stone boundary. Something was wrong with her. That's who the cops should have shoved in the back of the seat, not me. "You got to cut this out, mate. This isn't the first time we've warned you about this," the shorter one said. What was I supposed to cut out? Did he mean I should get a haircut? "You're Jared, right?" I nodded straight away and kept blinking. The cops glanced at each other before we drove off. It didn't take long before we pulled up outside Mum's flat. The door was still open. Was I supposed to get out the car now and go inside? "Hurry up, you crazy bugger, out you get." I slid across the back seat and opened the car door. "And don't let us find you down the beach starkers again. Wear a pair of togs, you." "Mum!" I screamed once I reached the top step. She hadn't moved from the daybed. I shook her arm, but it was cold and stiff. I let out a howl like a dingo. The coppers raced up the steps after I started bawling and collapsed on the floor next to her. I might have been all right if Mum had woken up to remind me to take my meds, but neither of us were all right anymore.
I'm so happy you finally agreed to read for us. And as a challenge to all of you to hear the voices, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
I can't do it. So next is Margarita Escobar. She is the reason we are here today, because about a year ago she said, "How come you never do short stories? I'm publishing a book of short stories. You should do short stories." So thank you, Margarita. So Margarita is a former ICU nurse and a midwife. She writes in English and Spanish. In 2023, she published her short story collection, Under a Weeping Willow. Each tale traverses the intricacies of human condition with themes of love in all its forms, courage and hope, loss and grief, and what it means to grow older. Not much you can do, I think.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. This is my short story collection, Under a Weeping Willow. This collection features stories about women from different parts of the world at different stages of their lives. These women are not just characters. They are mothers, daughters, lovers, and even killers. Each with a story that will make you question your own perceptions. I'm going to read the story that came about from a trip to Thailand some years ago. It's called Behind the Curtain. As part of a daily routine, Shalai went to the temple to pray to Buddha. She had so much to ask him. She prayed for her mother's health, for her old sister Nui living in Australia, for her father's soul, and above all, she prayed for herself. She asked him to protect her from evil spirits and to guide her on the right path. The incense stick she held illuminated her beautiful features. A month ago, she turned 20. She had flawless skin, a tiny mouth, and enchanted slanted eyes. A cascade of straight black hair ran down her back. Shalai knelt in front of the statue of the walking Buddha. It was her favorite because this Buddha's right hand was raised in a gesture of reassurance. Also, the statue emphasized his earthly aspects. She put down a fruit offering at his shrine and left the temple. She strolled to her job in Kempson Road, where she worked at a small massage parlor located between an internet cafe and a bookshop. Coming from Yubon, her home city of about 100,000, to Bangkok, a metropolis of over 8 million, had been an overwhelming experience. She shared a room at Miss Anong's home, a humble boarding house on the outskirts of Bangkok. Kanika, a roommate, an introverted girl from the same age as Shalai, also came from Yubon. In the beginning, Kanika wasn't prone to small talk, but as time went by, the two girls became friends. It intrigued Shalai how Kanika managed her earnings because her roommate never seemed to be short of money. But Shalai thought it wouldn't be polite to ask about it. Shalai had been working at the parlor for about 6 months. Miss Dow, the owner, liked her. She talked to her in a gentle tone and gave her fair pay. But money was always short. After paying rent to Miss Anong, getting groceries and sending money to her mother, there wasn't much left. She missed her sister Nui. Barely a year older, they used to share most things: a bed, house chores, clothing, and dreams. Nui used to work as a waitress at a restaurant in downtown Bangkok. There, she met an Australian man, 25 years her senior. After a short courtship, he asked her to move to Australia with him. She liked him enough to accept his offer, but above all, she wanted to be looked after by a man with means who would offer her a better life than the one she had in Thailand. Yui got in touch with her family often at the beginning, but after a while, her phone calls and letters became infrequent. However, she dutifully sent her mother money. Shalai met her sister and often wondered about her life in Australia. Was she happy? But Shalai had her own dreams. She thought of her job at the parlor as temporary. She wanted more out of life. Her main dream was to emigrate to Australia, as her sister had done. She heard people talking about a wonderful country, stunning beaches, and a good economy. She dreamed about living there. Someday, if her dream came true, she'll bring her mother so she could take care of her. Maybe, just maybe, she could meet a good man and start a family of her own. When Shalai got to her place, Miss Anong was waiting for her. It's good you are home. I'm concerned about Kanika. What happened? I'm not sure, but she didn't want to eat and she's been crying. I'll go and see her. Shalai knocked softly on the door. Kanika was lying on the bed, head under a pillow, sobbing quietly. Shalai came closer, gently touching her friend's head. What is the matter? Silence. Kanika didn't move. You miss your family? Are you sick? May I help you in any way? She asked. No, you can't help me. No one can. Why do you say that? I'm pregnant. Kanika's voice sounded curt and abrupt. But you don't have a boyfriend. How can you be pregnant? As she dried her tears, Kanika folded her hands over her stomach. Oh, Shalai, you are so naive. Dragging nails down her cheeks, Kanika added, I can't have this baby. It would bring dishonor to my family. Can the baby's father help you? I don't know who the father is. What do you mean? I'm a sex worker. Shalai's eyes grew big. She opened her mouth in a silent exclamation. You want me to spell it for you? Kanika asked. Shalai returned her friend's frown with a little hostility. I know what a sex worker does. No, you don't. Do you think I enjoy this? I hate it with all my heart. Why do you do it then? Kanika sighed, rolled her eyes, and said, because I need the money to send to my family. I have 5 younger siblings and my parents to look after. They're counting on me to get by. Tilting her head, Shalai asked, what are you going to do? It was night. The 2 girls walked down a dark alleyway on the periphery of Bangkok. When they reached the address they'd given, they stopped and scanned their surroundings, the semi-darkness menacing. The location reeked of unattended garbage. Trembling and holding hands, they entered a small, dark waiting room of a backstreet place. The paint on the walls was peeling off, and the floor looked unkempt. A tattered piece of fabric hung from the ceiling like a curtain. No one was there. This place looks sinister, Shalai whispered. You can leave now if you want, you know. No, I couldn't leave you here all by yourself. Thanks, Shalai. Good evening, ladies. Who is having the job done? The voice belonged to a slight man, wearing a stain of white lab coat. He had a long gray beard and crooked teeth. That's me, doctor. Kanika's voice quivered. I'm not a doctor, child, but I can help you. Kanika didn't reply. She couldn't utter a word, her chin and lips trembling. Do you have the money? Her small hands shook uncontrollably when she gave it the bills. After counting the money, he touched her elbow. Come with me, it won't take long. Shalai noticed he had dirty nails. Kanika and the little man left the room and disappeared behind the curtain. Shalai paced the floors, biting her nails, praying while waiting for Kanika to reappear from behind the curtain. But when it opened, she didn't see her friend. Instead, the man, now wearing a bloody apron, stood there, panic written all over his face. He shouted, get your friend out of here. She needs hospital, too much bleeding. She ran to Kanika's side, helped her off the bed, and dragged her to the street, screaming, help, help. No taxis were around. A tuk-tuk passed, but I didn't stop. The next morning, Shalai went to the temple to pray to Buddha. She had so much to ask him. She prayed for her mother's health, for her older sister Nui returning to Bangkok, and for her father's soul. But most of all, she prayed for Kanika's spirit, looking after her from heaven. Thank you.
Wow, Margarita, we've been friends for many years, but I don't think I've ever heard you read before. I was not knowing what to expect. I believe I promised Carmy to go number 3. So Carmy Stubbs is a reader, writer, storyteller, and poet. You become late, you have to sit in front. She is a lover of the word and its power for transformation. She is the author of the 6 Knowings of Asira. She lives in Port Coquitlam with her husband, Antonio, and her newest member of her family, little dog, Milo. If any of you came for the sci-fi or speculative fiction, I'm sorry, reading, Carmy read there. But I think she's going to read something different today.
Thank you. That's excellent. Okay. Thank you. Thank you to everyone for coming out. Today, actually, I'm going to read something that's quite intimate, and I'm a bit of a tremble about it. It's a story, I'm going to be reading a story about my mother, Carmen Gomez Martinez. She passed away in 2015, and I actually wrote a version of this story in 2016. I wrote a series of short stories and a poem, which ended up with a digital story called In the Light of the Moon, all to do with integrating the grief and challenges that happened in that time. So yes, in a way it could be sad, but at the same time, I hope that you'll feel the peace and the joy in it too. The storyteller looked up from his papers in aching anxiousness, for even though life was continuously confirming that he should tell the stories, the dread of actually doing so could sometimes paralyze and nail him to the floorboards of any stage he ventured on. The storyteller of old took a breath and knew, and yes, that this too was fun. This too was the passion, a passion that could shatter all paralysis and fear into tiny pieces of nothingness. Yes, the passion could never be stopped, and the story quivered in the storyteller's hand, begging to be told, reveling in its own excitement as those 4 magical words danced out of his mouth. Once upon a time. Carmy stopped writing and raised her head towards her mother, leaving the storyteller of old in open-mouthed suspense. Her mother was so fragile, so defenseless, and yet so full of strength and timelessness in her 94th year. There in the blanched hospital room, Carmy sat by her mother's side, knowing that perhaps in a few hours, her mother's breathing would stop, not in temporary paralysis, but in a permanent finality that meant that Carmy would never see her mother breathe again. This was the finality that no one could ever be really prepared for. A single tear slowly rolled down Carmy's cheek. It was a tear that said it all in its simplicity, a tear that carried a piercing, happy sadness of, Mama, I know you have to go, you're being called. I can see your wings, Mama. You'll be able to fly forever in timeless eternity. I understand and I'm so happy for you. Mixed with, it hurts so much. I'm so sad. Mama, don't go. Carmy breathed in the happy sadness, consoled it, and breathed out a calm soothingness. She got up and rubbed her mother's forehead gently with lavender oil, whispering, I love you, Mama. Te quiero, Mama, te quiero. The Spanish language caressed both women in familiarity and love, Wisps of fragrant lavender floated around the hospital room, swirled and spiraled, coating the two women with an ancient healing of wild meadows. Carmy sat down again and glanced at her notebook. The storyteller was gazing up from the pages, suspended in a sparkling reality. Carmy smiled. Not now, not now, my old friend. The younger woman took her mother's hand and listened to the slow breathing. She closed her eyes, musing on the last few days, how she had become a mother to her mother. Who am I? Carmy had asked. Eres mi mamá. You're my mamá. The moment had been so sweet, so tender, that time itself had melted into a pool of presentness, its ripples radiating a nectar that healed all wounds, forgave all wrongs. Carmy felt her heart pull at her in a profound demand for her utmost attention, for unseen yet attached to both mother and daughter was a lustrous thread of connection and lineage that would never be severed. It contained one clear message woven in its iridescent thread. Life would never ever end. This was just another beginning, a birthing into something we called death, but that was so much more. I open my eyes, hearing how irregular my mama's breath has become. A single tear is rolling down her cheek. I squeeze her hand. Fly, mama, fly. You can do it, my love. We'll be okay. Estaremos bien. Look at your beautiful wings. You can go, mama. Te puedes ir. Vuela, mi amor. My mother stops breathing. Is it really just like that? Is that it? It is. In another dimension close to the heart, the storyteller of old looked up again at the people listening to him and said, the end and the beginning.
How, Carmy? We're 3 stories in, and I'm thinking every Writers in Our Midst should now be short stories, because it's brilliant, and it's so nice to hear a full story, and have so many different emotions. Hats down to you. I can't really do short stories. I really admire it. I have an amazing ability to put so much into so few words. Congrats to all of you. At the same time, to lighten things up, I have a feeling if I invite Dylan on stage, he's gonna give us something lighter. I edited your bio slightly, right? Dylan Wertz has been a television writer and producer for the past 20 years. He is currently working on a book of short stories about life in small town Saskatchewan in the 90s. He lives in Port Moody with his lovely wife and 2 lovely children.
This is a selection from that book. It's called The Loser. There's not much more to say. Ryan Wenzel was the only member of his friend group who had yet to get into a fight, and he was catching hell for it. In the small town of Leader, Saskatchewan, if you hadn't been in a proper tussle by the age of 16, it said something damning about your character. Losing or winning a fight was a rite of passage. It told others you weren't to be messed with. Having not been through this experience made Ryan less than in the eyes of his peers. But why he chose me for his premier foray into the violent arts, I have no idea. We barely knew each other. I mean, sure, in a town of 900 people, everybody knows everybody. And Ryan's dad, Neil, coached our hockey team. His between-period pep talks, which relied less on game strategy and more on the mental fortitude required to pass a kidney stone, were likely the reason our leader Bantams were 0-9 that season. But Ryan and I had never shared a conversation. As far as I knew, he felt the same mild ambivalence bordering on ignorance toward me as I felt towards him. So to hear out of the 300 odd kids in our high school, he would single me out was more than a little confusing. Ryan wants to fight you was the first I heard the news while switching birds at my locker. The words, though individually comprehensible, failed to compute when arranged in that order. What? Why? The news was delivered like a passing slap by one of Ryan's cohorts. Tonight, 7 o'clock at the park. Which park was never even a question. There was only one park in town. For the rest of the day, my life resembled a bad 1980s teen movie. News of the fight spread through the school at an alarming rate. Kids gave me knowing nods or punched my shoulder and threw me a quick good luck tonight as they passed me in the hallway. Were their well wishes ironic or sincere? I couldn't tell. I tried to talk to some of my friends about it, but they were too caught up in the swirling whirlwind of excitement to give me a practical opinion. The closest thing to advice I got was when my buddy Joel told me with great intensity, no matter how bad things get, don't cry. He was speaking from experience. Poor Joel had tripped over a plastic ball in gym class 2 years ago and landed knees first on the hardwood, resulting in an injury that would be hard to describe as more than a minor epidermal abrasion. But the shock of it couldn't stop the lovable butterball from letting the waterworks fly and demanding that his mom come pick him up. This resulted in Joel being labeled Little Bitch for the remainder of his time at Leader Composite School. To this day, the guy probably can't pick up a floor hockey stick without a mild trauma flashback. By the end of the day, I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that 100% of the school had heard about the evening fisticuffs and were eagerly looking forward to a rare bit of non-drug induced entertainment. I, meanwhile, was still lost in a fog of confusion, unaware how I got myself into this situation or how I was going to get myself out. With nobody reasonable at school left to talk to, I took the issue to the only two people who could look at the problem as objectively as possible, my parents. Like everything else in my life, my relationship with old Ma and Pa was completely average, purely transactional. Money for snacks exchanged for dishes done every evening after supper, and that was that. Me unwilling to share my innermost desires and them too scared of the truth to drag it out of me. So when I brought up the subject of my upcoming brawl that evening over dinner, forks were dropped and posture was corrected at the prospect of doing some honest-to-God parenting. I'm supposed to fight Ryan Wenzel tonight at the park, I spluttered out between bites of fried hamburger patty. That's not good, said Dad, the victory for my opponent already firmly cemented in his mind. Which one's Ryan Wenzel? You know him. He plays net for us. Oh, right, kidney stones kid. Mom's response was far more emotional. Why does he want to fight you? Who would want to fight you? I don't know. Apparently, he's the only one who hasn't been in a fight, and his friends are on him about it. You gonna do it? Asked Dad. I don't want to. But if you don't, you'll look like a wimp. Damn. He's right, I said, reluctantly taking Dad's side. Dad may be pessimistic, but he's also a realist. I can't see you doing very well. Your cousin can pin you down in 5 seconds flat. She's 2 years younger than you. Maybe I should call his mother, Mom chimed in. Surely she can't want this to happen either. She'll just pick him up. Problem solved. Mom, no. Dad, get your head out of your ass. The kid will be back at the park tomorrow and the beating will be twice as bad because he went crying home to his mom. I could just not show. Now and then he'd just get you some other time. True. Silence. Forks pulled kernels of corn from their creamy baths and pushed them around plates. McCain super fries were dipped in ketchup and chewed with intense contemplation. Mom finally broke the silence. What if you say you're sick? Surely he can't fault you if you're ill. That'll never fly. You could fake your own death. Helpful. Well, I don't see any way out of it. I think you have to fight him. I know. The weight of it all crushed me like a heavy stone. It's going to be bad. You can say that again, agreed Dad. You're going to get beat to hell. Once the plates were cleared and the dishes done, I said my goodbyes and headed out to meet my fate. Mom gave me a good luck kiss and a hug before my departure, and Dad, from his usual spot on the couch, shouted a parting, "Don't get your head kicked in." Never one to be late for anything, even my own ass whooping, I arrived at the park shortly before 7. Here the bad 80s movie continued as the area was crawling with revved up kids thirsty for blood. I made my way to the circle when local tough guy Regan Glauser approached on what was likely a stolen BMX. His plan is to come in swinging as soon as you get out there, so be ready. Okay, I mumbled and slowly stumbled forward. Oh, he called out. If you start winning, all his buddies are going to jump in and feed you a little "how's she going?" So you may want to consider taking a quick loss. Great, so even if by some miracle I did manage to get the upper hand, I was still a goner. There was literally no way I could come out of this scenario a winner. As I approached this event circle, willing myself a quick victory, I realized my headspace wasn't lined up for success. My brain was still taken up with confusion rather than a more helpful emotion like anger or even fear. I had no beef with this kid. To find myself forced into a situation of violence against him made no sense. But was I forced? At any time from the moment I was informed of the fight until right now, I could have walked away. Was I so in need of approval that I put myself through this ridiculous charade simply to not be labeled a wimp? Was I so reliant on other people's opinions that I'd risk having my face bashed in rather than stand up for my own morals and virtues? As I approached the battle area, I looked deep within myself and came to a firm conclusion. Yes, I was that pathetic. I looked up to see Ryan hurtling towards me, fist swinging, eyes wide with rage. I put up my own dukes in preparation for battle, and what followed was a tangled mess of blurred violence surrounded by the muffled cries of a bloodthirsty mob. Whoever choreographed fight scenes in movies has clearly never been in hand-to-hand combat, because the reality is far less awesome than Van Damme or Schwarzenegger would have me believe. Fighting is messy, especially if you have no idea what you're doing. You can try your best to land a firm punch at a predetermined target, but in the heat of the moment, it's just a lot of grabbing and empty swinging. Did he land a punch? Yes. Did I land a punch? No idea. Couldn't tell you to this day. If I did, the evidence was far less convincing the following morning when Ryan showed up with the faintest whisper of a bruise crossing his cheek. Here are 3 other things the movies don't tell you about fighting. 1, it's virtually painless. Sure, later there's some mild discomfort from the bruising, but in the heat of the moment, you don't really feel anything. This was quite a revelation to me, as pain was the #1 thing. Pain was the main thing causing me anxiety leading up to this whole dreaded affair. #2, fighting is hard work. Forget the gym. You want a great workout? Just walk up to some rando on the street and start swinging. You'll be burning carbs and dropping pounds faster than sweating to the oldies at some gym. And it's free. Which brings me to point #3. Fighting is a cardiocentric endeavor. In a last-minute attempt to bulk up, I naively crushed about 10 reps of arm curls with Dad's dumbbells on my way out the door. But it turns out I was wasting my time with strength training. You may be able to pound a nail into a brick wall with your fist, but fat load of good it's going to do you if you're sucking air 3 strokes in. Apparently, Ryan had also neglected this part of his free fight workout regime, as 30 seconds in, he was just as winded as I was. We ungrappled from one another and stood huffing and puffing opposite. My favorite chip and pepper shirt ripped and bloodied. Note to self, next fight, come dressed in a shirt you don't care about. Also, there's probably no need to do your hair. The crowd looked on, confused and disappointed. So, are we done? I asked, between gulps of warm Saskatchewan air. Not by a long shot, he puffed. I just need a minute. And there we stood, the idiocy of our actions staring us in the face and us too blind by ego to see it. Perhaps in a different life, Ryan and I could be friends. Maybe even this little tussle would bring us closer together, creating an unbreakable bond. Nobody in the world would ever know what the two of us knew in that half a minute of elbows and shins and grass and sky. It was a sacred space only we two occupied, and if we were open to it, it could make us closer than brothers. I was so lost in this idyllic vision of our future that I didn't clock Ryan charging me. My unawares gave him the upper hand, allowing him to pin me to the ground. Here my strategy shifted to defense as I did my best to shield my face from his blows. This is it, I thought, as fist after fist made its way through my weakening forearms. This is where pain enters the equation. And then a song, a lilting hymn of an angel drifting through the trees, the sweet music of freedom that would release me from this relentless battery. Ryan Wenzel, you get in this car right now. His mom. Apparently Ryan and his parents hadn't had a charming heart-to-heart before his battle, but she found out anyway. Ryan, his worst nightmare coming true in real time, hopped off me, braying a pitiful, "Oh, Mom," and jumped into the SUV, which tore away with a squeal. Then there was silence. Just me on the ground and my disappointed spectators, slowly dispersing like former virgins lying on their backs after prom, thinking, well, hell, I thought it'd be more exciting than that. As I stood up, brushing the grass from my stained jeans, I spotted Joel in the distance, his pride regarding my lack of tears displayed an enthusiastic thumbs up. And me with my bloody lip and ripped shirt, ambling home along an empty gravel street, wondering what was the point of any of that. Will there be a rematch? And most importantly, who won? I had landed less punches than him and was definitely in worse shape when the fight ended. But then again, I wasn't the one picked up and dragged home by his mommy. The answer as to who was the victor would be answered by my father. As I washed my bruised and bloodied face in the bathroom sink, he leaned his heavy frame against the door and waited until I looked up to meet his gaze. So, he said, taking a long pull from his Molson Canadian and sucking the foam from his mustache. Looks like you lost.
Thanks. I was hoping for something light, and instead you brought back traumatic memories. I never told my parents so. Any volunteers? Winona? All right, let me just find you first. Winona Kent is the award-winning author, 10 novels, including her soft-boiled musical mystery, Jason Davies series. The next book is due out still September of 2024, and an anthology of short stories, that worried my mother, is now out. I bought it from my mother and I love it very much. She lives in New Westminster.
You hear me coughing, I have an allergy, I'm not sick. So I normally write long fiction and occasionally some short stories escape from me. And I put a lot of them in this book, 10 stories that worried my mother, and they did. And I wrote, this is probably the shortest thing I've ever written. I'm usually very long-winded. I wrote this story when I was working in Regina in 1981 as a temp. And I ended up in this government office that looked after cows. And it's all mostly true. I once had a job that required me to be concerned about cows. Our file number 500.5, 07 July 1981. Dear, the Herd Maintenance Assistance Program Review Board has reviewed your application as a result of your appeal to have your eligible herd size increased. The board has upheld your appeal and your application has been resubmitted for processing. This reprocessing may result in either an assistance payment or rejection under other program criteria. You will be advised of the results. Yours truly, A. Zinkowski, Coordinator, Herd Maintenance Assistance Program, AZ/WK. The men in this department wear suits and ties and occupy all of the supervisory positions. They have private offices with windows and they go downstairs for coffee in small groups of 3 and 4. The women are clerk typists and occupy small corrals made out of orange padding in the middle of the floor. Women from the same department are not allowed to go for coffee together. Because of the lack of available windows, I must go into the women's washroom to see what the weather is like. The window is high on the wall and I have to climb onto the counter containing the sinks and then stand on my toes in order to look outside. It is sunny today, but there are clouds gathering on the horizon. The other women in the department are concerned about my obsession with the outside and do their best to avoid me. I return to my little corral and punch 3 holes into the carbon copy of the memo I typed, then place the yellow sheet of paper into a binder on a shelf above my desk. Perhaps I will now peruse an official pamphlet while I await the arrival of my next item of correspondence. Alfalfa production in Western Canada. Maintenance of community pasture land. This looks promising. Stop poisoning weeds of the West. Our file number 501.5, 07 July 1981. Dear, your appeal to have your milk cows redesignated as dairy cattle has been upheld by the Herd Maintenance Assistance Program Review Board. A supplementary assistance payment will be issued to you in the near future. Yours truly, A. Zinkowski, Coordinator, Herd Maintenance Assistance Program, AZ/WK. Crisis has arisen. A husband and wife have both claimed assistance for the same herd of livestock, each filling separate applications. My supervisor has spent the last half hour shouting on the telephone. I imagine the man and his wife standing side by side in a field filled with Holsteins. They hold each hold an official letter from my supervisor demanding the return of one of the payments or a reduction in the number of animals in each claim. A vertical red dotted line separates the couple and also divides the herd into 2 equal parts, bisecting several individual and very startled-looking cows. It is not good to cheat the government, accidentally or otherwise. In the cubicle beside the photocopier, there is a ritual of leaving underway. One of our number has decided to reproduce, and today is her last in the department. The conversation ranges from husbands to babies, with mortgages thrown in for variety. They have collected money for a special gift, a bracelet with her name engraved upon it, an identity at last. I avoid the ritual of leaving as I'm only a temp. I have applied for a transfer, to the Department of Regional and Economic Expansion. At DRE, they prepare memos concerning community complexes. Somewhere in Saskatchewan, an entire town is suffering from the ravages of feeling inferior. Soon it will be time for lunch. Perhaps this afternoon I will photocopy the palms of my hands. I have often wondered what it would happen if I set the machine to 1000 and disappeared. Will someone else come along and replace the paper when it runs out? Press the button to continue the copying. Recently, a memo was circulated concerning the photocopier. It has been noted that, on several occasions, large quantities of yellow and pink circles from the 3-hole punch have been found in the automatic paper feed. These have been rapidly distributed throughout the internal mechanisms of the machine, causing serious malfunctions and resulting in many lost hours of productive time and escalating repair costs. The women occupying the cubicle beside me eats the little paper circles which come out of the 3-hole punch. Our file number 502.5, 07 July 1981. Dear, the Herd Maintenance Assistance Program Review Board has reviewed your application as a result of your appeal against your rejection on the basis of crop yield. The board has upheld your appeal and your application has been resubmitted for processing. This reprocessing may result in either an assistance payment or rejection under other program criteria. You will be advised of the results. Yours truly, A. Zinkowski, Coordinator, Herd Maintenance Assistance Program, AZ/WK. There is a major crisis in the building. The smell of raw sewage is infiltrating the floors. Departmental supervisors are in a panic. They rush down to have coffee in groups of 5 and 6. Phone calls fly between herd maintenance and public works. I have photocopied the palms of my hands and sent 18 of these to DRE and 47 to public works. I have taken the opportunity to climb onto the counter in the women's washroom and look outside. Discovered that we are in the midst of a thunderstorm. With my supervisor downstairs in the canteen debating the dangers of raw sewage, I resorted to making elaborate designs on yellow bond paper with various bottles of correcting fluid. I have several shades at my desk and have titled my work, Liquid Paper in 3 Colors with Red Pen. The woman in the cubicle beside me has 4 colors, as pink is extra. I have considered jealousy as a reaction, but have rejected it as an inappropriate response, since I have a red pilot vineliner pen and she does not. Meanwhile, a memo has arrived from Public Works. Our file number 606.2, 07 July 1981. This will acknowledge that we are attempting to place the problem of the sewer gas smell under control. Our investigation has indicated a faulty sewer link connection in the basement. The faulty line runs from the canteen staff toilet facilities to the building drainage lines. Our search for the root of the problem has not been facilitated by the fact that we've had a changeover of office staff since the toilet facilities were installed. Our plan of action is as follows. A, ensure the basement drain taps are properly sealed at all times with water, also disinfected as needed. B, arrange for a contract to correct the situation as soon as plans and specifications can be prepared and tenders called. This involves a sewage lift station to carry the waste to ceiling height sewage drains in the basement rather than trenching to the other side of the building. I realize the health hazard involved, but please be assured we have taken urgent steps to permanently remedy the situation and to eliminate any interim harmful effect. G. Williams, Property Manager. I have made 147 copies and put them in my out tray to be delivered to the supervisor in charge of community complexes at DRE. Men have returned from the canteen and are now busily making phone calls to confirm their conclusions. Tomorrow, when I type my letters, perhaps I will omit my initials from the lower left-hand corner. My supervisor's supervisor will not be able to tell who prepared the correspondence. Anarchy is in the air. Our file number 500.4, 07 July 1981. Dear, the Herd Maintenance Assistance Program Review Board has recommended that the township in which your wintering area is located be included in the severe drought area. Accordingly, we will resume processing of your application. This processing may result in either an assistance payment or rejection under other program criteria. You will be advised of the results. A. Zinkowski, Herd Maintenance Assistance Program, AZ/. We are being sent home because of the fumes. The union has advised us that they constitute a health hazard. Some of the supervisors have elected to stay on the job. We will not lose any pay as a result of this action. I have switched off my IBM Selectric, indicating that I am no longer here. Tomorrow morning, I will not switch it on again until I have rearranged the pens in the top drawer of my desk. On my way out, I pass the photocopying room. I pause at the copier and remove an envelope from my pocket. I pull open the paper tray and pour in the contents of the envelope. I slide it shut again. A recent federal study has concluded that padded cubicles are well tolerated by most office workers in large impersonal settings. Soon I will be transferred to Dree on the 14th floor, and I will no longer need to be concerned about
I love that story. And I'm not sure if it's because I worked for the federal government. And maybe if you've worked for the government, you understand filling out forms to acquire more forms to fill out. We didn't have an order. Rohini, would you like to? All right. It's like a dentist's office, isn't it? Rohini Sunderam is a Port Coquitlam writer of Indian origin. She is a semi-retired advertising copywriter whose articles and stories have appeared in The Statesman, The Globe and Mail, the Halifax Chronicle Herald, and several Braheen-based publications. She is the author of several books, including Desert Flower, Cold Poetry, 5 Lives of a Day in Braheen, and 12 Roses for Love.
wonder if I could be heard. Thank you. I won't go through any preamble. I'll just read the story. It's called Your Birth, My Death. So many solid bodies, too solid, so many murky lives. My aching, lonely journey has lasted centuries. At last, I feel the end approaches. That light, is it there? Waiting to embrace me once again, to annihilate the agony of life. I have been separated from the great oneness for too long, and yearn, like the river rushing to its silent sea, to return. If her mind floats, I can recall my own memories, and through them, perhaps, both an expiation and an explanation. Her pain medications blur my light. When her consciousness dims, my vision will be clearer. Then I will be able to look back. It's a gunmetal grey day in Earth Reckoning 1695 AD. The weight of a lowering sky crushes me. Clouds rumble. I am choking. The pressure bears down on me. It's pushing my molecules tighter, tighter, closer. I am gasping. A woman screams. Lightning cracks the surly clouds, and I have my first sensation of death, interpreted as life on this side. The life force bursts through, and the midwife grabs the head of the infant into which I have been thrust, extruded, broken, removed from the one. What travesty have I committed to be condemned to life? I am flung into life. My sense of loss is smothered by the infant's full-bodied scream. He gulps air. It clouds my sense of independence, and I amalgamate to the body in which I am trapped. After that, I only had glimpses of self-awareness as the fragment of a soul, the soul. I have entered a newborn male, and he is at his mother's breast. She weeps. I sense her soul, and we connect briefly. She holds up the baby boy and kisses him, whispers, "Debu, my Debu." The pleasure sensed by the baby dulls my perception, and I am further enmeshed in the child's body. As he grows, I try to make him aware of me, his inner soul, of goodness and harmony. He shakes his head to quiet my efforts. Debu is an illegitimate half-breed. Occasionally, his father, an Englishman in India, visits his mother to give her money, but barely looks at the boy. The boy's anger grows with the years, dulling me into silence.
I sense his bile and it darkens his vision. He is constantly angry, even as a 2-year-old. He is reviled by the village boys and learns to fight. He is spry and starts to climb trees at the age of 5. He sneaks into the nearby village and steals mangoes and bananas, devouring them like a monkey. Even those animals become wary of this feral creature that I cannot reach. Once I showed him the beauty of a wild jasmine as a tiny bee approached it. Momentarily, he gasped at its beauty, and then the demons of his anger took charge and he swiftly crushed both flower and insect, sweeping my influence aside with a snarl. He avoided his mother's hut on the days when he knew his father was likely to come. She was happy on those days, took care to bathe extra carefully, perfume her hair with rose water, and apply the red kumkum to the parting in her hair, pretending to be his wife. But the man never married her. He came once a month and gave her money. Sometimes they disappeared inside the hut and the father came out looking pleased. But Debu's mother remained inside while he, Debu, concealed himself in a tree, watched his father emerge, go up to his horse and ride away without a backward glance. The day he turned 16, the Englishman returned after a long absence. His mother by now had aged and lost the full-bodied beauty that had first enchanted his father. Debu and his mother lived on the outskirts of the village. Both had been outcasts since his birth. For the first time, the man turned and looked at him. Oi, he called. I am not Oi, the boy said in his native Bengali, challenging him with his green eyes flecked with brown, such a reflection and indictment of the man's part in his inheritance. I sensed the boy's desire for blood. It was strong enough to stir me out of my stupor. I flicker like a flame in a breeze. These thoughts are wrong. Don't do it. You will condemn us. He had made a spike out of a bamboo picked from a nearby grove. He hid it behind his back and hardened his heart. Hate spread like ink and water and smothered me. With the hatred rising in his throat, he dismissed my attempts at weeping into his brain and heart. The man turned and looked at the lad. Disgust and anger faltered as a small light of anguished love shot through his eyes. In that glimmer, I connected with the father. He hesitated. The boy only saw disgust and anger. His own visceral abhorrence rolled like the monsoon clouds of his birth. A primeval cry, and he lunged forward, spike in hand, and all my warnings for me, his soul, were lost in the pure, raw anger that engulfed us. He plunged the spike in the Englishman's stomach. All love and all connection were lost. The boy was no match for the superior strength and training of the Englishman, who, although injured, knocked him down in seconds and landed a brutal kick on his side. Debu howled as the man grabbed his bleeding stomach, whipped the boy's loincloth off him, bound his wound, and staggered away while flinging money at his mother. She, through her tears and screaming, ran around, grabbing at the coins, collecting them, and tying them into a knot in her sari. Debu lay whimpering and naked on the ground. His screaming frustration was so loud that my still small voice was squashed. That night, I connected with Debu. He wept incessantly, but I comforted him. Be good, be kind, don't let anger and hate get the better of you. Control them, and there can be salvation. But history had other designs for us. The next day, a military police guard came to the woman's hut. 2 men dismounted from their horses and grabbed Debu. A third, who seemed to be a half-breed, kept his head down and a tight rein on the horse and trap he was driving. Fear, remorse, anger, loathing gurgled thick as the mud that oozes in the Hooghly River. It clouded Debu's brain, heart, and belly, creating an impenetrable wall between him and me. The mother screamed and wept. She clung to her son, threw herself on the path in front of the men, railing abuse at them. They brushed her away like a mosquito. She was left beating the earth in her own private hell. Debu went numb. His eyes turned dense as gangrened copper while the Englishman tied his hands and feet, bundled him into the trap, and rode to the nearby township of Sudanati on the far side of the river's bank. This tiny hamlet is destined to become the city known as Calcutta. But back in 1711 AD, it was little more than a village. The Englishmen of the growing East India Company had established a small military stack holding here, and Debu's father, a mercenary soldier, worked with them. The attack made his father declare that Debu was a danger to him, his mother, and himself. They threw him into prison. In the dark, despair engulfed him. I had shrunk so small that I didn't have a voice in his heart at all. With every heartbeat, I tried to revive my glow, to no avail. My light grew dimmer as I watched him. In a trance, he undid his loincloth, then climbed at the side of the cell wall made of thick, gnarled bamboo trunks. He made a noose, slung it onto the rafters, and put it around his neck. Then, kicking off against the wall, he sang. The noose tightened. He choked until no breath remained. I had no choice. I left his body. My light and strength were too faded for me to find my way to the great soul. I was condemned to find another body and pray that it would be a human being who understood, recognized, and obeyed the eternal soul. I floated, wondering where the ether would take me. Again, I was aware of another death as I entered another life. I floated across to another part of the world and emerged screaming as another life force, another boy. This time I was born to greater privilege in, of all the irony, the home of an English gentleman. It was the evening of November 8th, 1711, in Bristol, England. Thomas Markin, master of Her Majesty's ships, the Sarah and Hannah of London, had arrived from Virginia in time to receive the news that he was the proud father of a son and that his wife, Mary Elizabeth, was well. I, his son's soul, was completely silenced when the baby let out his lusty announcement of life. My son and heir, Thomas Bartholomew James Markin, his father announced in the adjoining room, distributing cigars from Virginia, a fashionable new gesture in England at the time. Thomas Bartholomew was a prig. His animal desires, tastes, and demands almost extinguished me. In the 58 years of his life, only twice was he dimly aware of me. Once was at the age of 19 when he awoke early one morning and witnessed dawn breaking over the pine trees of the estate to which he would soon be heir. There was a flicker deep in his heart in recognition of the ethereal beauty before him and the possibility that it wasn't all an accident but had come about by divine intervention. Then his pride in the fact that it would all soon be his dismissed my nudge. The second time was when his mother died. His anguish and deep true love for her brought him to his knees, and he mouthed the prayers that had been instilled in him since childhood. That was when I tried my best to stretch into a fine fiber to connect his head and heart and spark the neurons into a consideration of larger issues. With my diminished powers, I snapped, and the connection was never made. Thomas Bartholomew led an uneventful life. He almost never sailed like his father, and so had no opportunities to confront the meaning of his life. When he died in December 1769, my release from his body rendered me into no more than a ghostly cloud without substance or light. I went from England to France. The baby lived for 2 months. From there, the ether took me to Italy. The baby lived for barely 2 weeks, and in China, it died within hours. Eventually, my spark began to grow in America, in the colony the English had named the province of New York. He was a sweet child, born to a Presbyterian chaplain, whose home served as a refuge for wounded patriots and royalists alike. At 5, Joseph marveled at the beauty of a butterfly and let it fly away to live. I was reignited. Joseph fanned that pale glow with his kindness. He took a spiritual interest in his father's faith. But more than that, he genuinely cared for those who were hurt or wounded. I began to hope again, and my light glowed brighter. In 1850, he died, and some of my early power returned. But still, I wasn't strong enough to return to the great soul. I found the membrane between here and the one, but not the strength to penetrate it. I returned to earth, but couldn't enter a body by choice. Once again, I was born into a rich home as the son of a contractor in Paris, France. Jacques was a poet. His appreciation of fine things of beauty kept my light glowing, but did nothing to strengthen it. Jacques was frequently moved by the poverty he saw around him and gave generously from the allowance his father provided. There was the reluctance of the body to move beyond pity to genuine care. And so, although I survived, my light did not grow stronger. He died at the young age of 47 in 1897. In his death, he redeemed me somewhat by deeply repenting his wasted life. My next birth was a baby girl, my first female. The country was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and her name was Sophie. She grew into a gentle, caring being, though she had been born into privilege. At 22, she became a missionary, and my light shone like a beacon within her. The family was opposed to it, but she connected with me. I needed to make a difference, she whispered. Why did God give me the power to reason, think, and learn, if not to help? I warmed her heart. I will care for you, I whispered back. For the next 15 years on her journeys to the poor and neglected in India, I did what I could to warn her of danger. In 1919, I spoke to her in a dream and kept her away from the town of Amritsar in April that year when the British fired on the Indians at Jallianwala Bagh. Alas, I couldn't stop the cholera that caught her when she reached Calcutta in 1926. But I was back in the place where I started as a life. Perhaps at last I would find my way home. When Sophie died, I found Deepika here in Calcutta. I had floated for only a few seconds when I entered her body. 80 blessed years she has lived. We grew from the time she was barely 2 years old. I recall her recognition of me expressed in a beautiful smile, and her skin glowed. So many came to see her. She dispensed wisdom and sweetness in a myriad ways. They called her Devi, goddess. She gave of her time and her kindness, even if it was caressing a puppy or giving milk to a stray cat. She pleaded with her parents to give money to the poor, and they responded to her gentle requests. Deepika grew into a lovely girl, a wonderful wife and friend. She cared for family and friends. At her wedding, the flames reached out, seeking her benediction. The wedding guests exclaimed, "Truly, this is a goddess." Deepika's joy in her temporal circumstances did not last. Typhoid took her husband, but not her heart. She shaved her head as a widow, stoically enduring her condition. She rejected the mores of the time and place and used her education to become a teacher, supplementing her income with tuitions. She showered love on all, brought harmony to those in trouble, and visited the sick. Her work with other widows became her mission, and she taught so many not to succumb to the shame of widowhood. In Calcutta at the time, widows had few options outside of prostitution. If fortunate, they could take a backseat in running their husband's business affairs. Deepika taught the widows to sew, to run small businesses, and to cater to the English. And when they left, she helped widows to find work in the slowly burgeoning industries. During the turmoil of India's independence, when the country was ripped by partition, Deepika left home to help refugees from East Pakistan. There was nothing we couldn't do, Deepika and I. Now my light is strong, and although the cancer is racking her body with pain, I whisper, "Not much longer." And she smiles. "Why are you smiling, Ma?" her daughter Deepti asks. Care, sorrow, and tears drown her soul. Deepika opens her eyes. "Don't worry, darling," I say through her. "Soon I will truly be born, join the great soul, and dissolve my id. This time I'll make it back. Now I remember that that was my travesty, my desire for self."
Wow. I was waiting for the soul to go into a woman. So I'm glad it did. I'm gonna have to give you a horror writer. So, Port Moody author Lozano Gilabert studied and worked as a psychotherapist for nearly 12 years before becoming a writer. Lozano spent many Friday evenings at one of Mexico's main psychiatric hospitals interviewing patients. Some say, including me, that his stories are based on what he learned through those interviews. Hi, everyone. Well, this story is part of this collection, Voices from the Dead. They're all ghost stories. I hope you like them. This is called Social Media. That night, while I brushed my teeth, the temptation came once again to check my social media. My phone vibrated every time I got a new message, and I hadn't felt it shudder. But since I started having these dreams about 2 weeks ago, I had to check. I felt that if I didn't check it often enough, something terrible would happen. I have this sensation, this certainty. It's like when you have to check all the stove valves 5 times before leaving, or inspect the door's locks precisely 7 times, because if you don't, something horrible is going to happen. It's not something concrete, it's just this impending sense of doom. As I was saying, that night, I unlocked my phone only to discover that there was nothing new on it. But while I was holding it, it shook and a little round bubble with the number 1 appeared. You have a new message from Jules de Grancy. Hackers, I thought immediately. It had to be hackers. Who else would do such a thing? It couldn't be Jules. One dream arose from my memory. It was nighttime. I was in my bedroom, sleeping over the quilt, fully dressed. The phone was ringing. I could see it screen down on the nightstand. I knew it was Jules, but I didn't want to answer. The phone kept ringing. I turned it around and confirmed it was just calling, but I just didn't want to answer because my friend Jules had been dead for 7 years. The anniversary of his death was due in a couple of weeks. Maybe Nora, his widow, was using his account to organize something with his contacts. That sounded reasonable, but she would have told me. My hand trembled a little as I opened the message. Hey, Matt, I need to talk to you. My mouth was dry, and it was hard to swallow. I typed back, who are you? What do you mean? I'm Jules. I'm reporting you, I typed, and closed the message. I stopped smoking about 10 years ago, but somehow I found a pack in one of my old hiding spots. The cigarette tasted like tarmac on a hot day, but I needed it. I contacted the social media company and told them what had happened. They informed me that only the next of kin would be able to close the account. I didn't want to open at once, but this had to stop. I had to contact Nora. Why would someone pretend to be him? What would they ask me for something? Deep down, a thought pushed itself into my mind. What if it is Jules? I took out my phone and called Nora. Hi, it's me, I said. Finally, she said. Why didn't you call me back? I couldn't, it's too much. We're lonely, Matt, and we're perfect for each other. It's not going to happen again, I said. But why? It's not like you didn't enjoy it. But he was my best friend. She chuckled, and I could imagine her shaking her head. That's what you say, but you keep coming back for more, she said. Silence. I know, I said. You're right, but I keep having these dreams. Stop it. Don't start with that again, okay? Why don't we go somewhere nice for the weekend? I didn't answer. I thought the best way to tell her about the message and what about I was feeling. Look, I have to go, she said. Call me for Thursday, okay? Bye. I said bye and hung up. She wasn't going to believe me about the messages. Not even if I showed them to her. Maybe it was just guilt. Why was I thinking about Jules so much? What would I feel if my best friend, never mind? I wouldn't feel anything. I would be dead. But the messages were real. Who could be sending them? The next day on an elevator, a man stole a glance at me. His expression told me he thought I was crazy. I don't blame him. I had checked my phone 8 times in 4 floors. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and any noise would make me swerve in fear. I bought a brand new pair of cigarettes. After supper, I made a resolution. I wasn't going to tell Nora about the messages. I would solve my issues and take her to the spa hotel in the mountains she has been telling me about. If a hacker had breached his account security, then another hacker would be able to close his account. If Jules had been alive, I would have gone directly to him. He was the best hacker I've ever seen. He hacked the university service to prove that he could have straight A's if he wanted to. He changed all his grades and even printed a report card as a souvenir. Immediately afterwards, he turned his grades to what they had been. I felt nostalgic. I miss my good old rule-bending, you won't stop me friend. After I made the reservation for the spa and told Nora about it, I spent the rest of my evening trying to figure out how to hire a hacker. At last, I found one and left him a message with my contact info. By then, my shaking had spread to both my hands.
I stank of nicotine. I wouldn't be able to sleep if I didn't have one last smoke and a scotch. I was drowsing off when I felt a vibration in my pocket. I reached out for my phone, but my pocket was empty. My phone was on the nightstand. I had started to get these phantom colds, if you will, a couple of weeks back. My doctor said most people with a smartphone have them. While I had my hand in my pocket, I felt a vibration again, and then, less than a second afterwards, my phone shook and a new message appeared. Are you mad at me? Why aren't you answering? The scotch made me daring. I was fed up with being afraid. I decided to play along. Probably it was just a teenager trying to squeeze some money out of me. I haven't known anything from you in the last 7 years, and you expect me not to be upset, I typed. It hadn't been that long, had it? It's been a rough couple of weeks since everything went forward with the car. Forward? Shivers ran down at my waist to my neck. Who uses forward nowadays? No one. Only a World War II buff like Jules. The impersonator was good. But of course, he had Jules' social media information to know which words he used, what he liked, who his friends were, everything. Everything. I poured some more scotch into the glass and drank it straight. What do you want? I wrote. To talk to you. Don't you want to talk to me anymore? Okay, I'm listening. Whoa, I thought you of all people would be more interested in knowing what lies beyond the great unknown. Meaning? Come on, don't you remember that conversation we had on the fishing trip? You had always wanted to know what happened after death. The whiskey glass slipped from my grasp as a frozen clam clutched my heart. If I remember correctly, we were alone in that boat. The shaking worsened. Had I ever talked about it to anyone else? We were in the middle of a lake. There was no one there. How could he know? I closed the chat and lighted another smoke. I realized something. Who knows when the microphones on our phones are on or the camera? For all I know, someone might be recording us all the time. But to what purpose? Neither Jules nor I work in anything worth spying on. It made no sense. Probably we were off the grid on that lake. It was cold, and I turned to grab my sweater. I felt a vibration and I thought I knew my phone would start in a second if I let it, so I turned it off. In the morning, the hacker called me on my landline to set up an appointment. That evening, I was in a basement room with black cartridge bags taped to the windows as blackout. I sat next to what looked like a puke-stained office chair. A bare light bulb shone from the ceiling, but no less than 6 monitors illuminated the hacker's face. He had neglected the decor, but the technology was state-of-the-art. Smoke rose from a lit but forgotten cigarette in my hand. We'll be in no time, the hacker said. He tapped the keyboard at a steady pace and pressed the enter key after each burst of typing. It seemed to me his tempo was getting progressively faster. Then he hit the enter key with particular emphasis. My pulse throbbed on my neck. Is it ready? Is it closed? I asked. Who are we messing with? He said. Whoever it is blocking our attempts, the hacker said. Between each line of code, a single sentence repeated itself. Why do you want to shut me off? I took a drag. It couldn't be Jules, could it? The hacker kept trying for another half an hour, but he was getting nowhere. My head throbbed in sync with my heart. I was out of breath. I felt as if I had run a race and lost. I had an idea. Can you know where he's physically located? I asked, already imagining a pair of thugs getting hold of him. The hacker typed, paused, typed again, paused, typed a third time, and asked, Really? Who are we messing with? I've never seen anyone do this. Why? I asked. Because according to this, his open hand pointed to the screens, the person blocking our attempts is in this room. Deep down, I knew. I stared at the screens, trying to find an explanation, but something caught my eye. Through the cigarette smoke, I could see Jules' diaphanous head and hands. He was typing. Then Jules raised his head and looked at me. He pointed at a monitor. In the middle of the screen, 4 words shone back at me. I know about Nora. All the oxygen left the room, and I gasped, suffocating as my head exploded. I felt faint. I looked around the room for an explanation, mouthing for air. Everything was swirled around me. I heard the hackers' voice coming from far, far away, calling my name, while I collapsed to the floor. Thank you.
A few years back, during COVID, I believe, we did a Halloween short story one. And now that we can meet in person, maybe that's what we should do next. So if any of my short story writers could write something creepy, that would be fun. I believe it's tradition that Gisela's our head. So Gisela Woldenga is an author and actress living in Coquitlam. She's the author of numerous short stories, children's stories, poems, and 9 recent fiction novels. She's a longtime member of the Tri-City Wordsmiths and the Port Moody Creative Writing Group.
Now, this is something totally different. Again, shorties. Okay. Okay, this is a letter to my body. The first time I became aware of you must have been through pain of some kind. I was still a baby, a toddler. I don't remember, but I bet it had to do with a fall or stomach upset. Anyway, I noticed that you had your own way of communicating with me. On the whole, I thought that you, my body, couldn't have been better. That feeling changed when I grew up. I sprouted freckles, needed glasses. Oh, I didn't always like you then. My disappointments grew during the puzzling time between child and adulthood. I grew up too fast for me. You grow up too fast for me, ahead of the bodies of my classmates. Body hair and outbreaks of acne were most unwelcome. Razors, lotions, powders. What was I going to do with you? And bubbles were good though. Eventually you, as skin, emerged clear and I heaved a sigh of relief. I have been happy with you ever since. You made it possible for me to get compliments from my own and the opposite sex. Even when you were stretched to the limit through 3 babies that you kept in place for me, it didn't take long after the birth for you to be your own normal self again. Sure, stretch marks stayed behind. You failed me there. Mind you, I subjected you to sunburns a few times. I apologize. But I tried to make you look good with moisturizers, creams, and at times concealers. For the rest of you, my best. Read you right. Paid attention to food allergies. Where did they come from? They weren't there before. Lately, I became aware of shrinkage, some drooping, part of wrinkles. My joints are not as flexible as they used to be. They even hurt often. Did you have to do that? I don't feel as old as my driver's license tells everyone, but you have been with me now a long time, and I don't fault you for getting a tiny bit tired. Maybe gravity is to blame as well. All I can do is hope that you're hanging on for a while longer, because I do love you, my dear hard-working body.
You were keeping it together, right? I think we all have to thank Sadie for all the technical support and all the adjustments of all the mics, so thank you so much, Sadie. I know through many organizations, people are always saying how supportive the Port Moody Library is to its authors, and it's mostly, not completely, but very heavily due to Sadie, so we should all thank her, so thank you so much. If you're not already, you should take a look at the White Pine section and add your books to it. I don't know if it's currently accepting.
Yeah.
But it's a great section in the library, in a good part of the library, even for a front that she supports local authors. So when you get your book from Dylan, you can bring it here. I really hope to do a Halloween themed one next. It's always fun. And one little piece of information, because I just learned this recently. Maybe some of you have already taken advantage of this, but the Tri-City News is looking for short stories. They feature it once a week on Sundays. If you go onto it, it's all online now, but they're, again, supporting local authors. And it's more than Tri-City News, it's also New West and Burnaby now too, so you're included. And maybe you can see your short stories online, which is always fun. But that's it for me. Thank you so much again for having us, Sadie, and the Port Moody Library. And 8:27, we're getting good at this.